this morning I woke up, I go through all my social media platforms, and I opened up X. There you go. The top 2 or 3 things on my trending was our guest now and contributor to Seculo is Tulsi Gabbard. So it's a pretty exciting morning to wake up and see this sort of breaking news, but also, Jordan, a topic that we feel like we need to bring attention to, and clearly, based on the amount of retweets that I was seeing, or reposts now, I can't say tweets, reposts, there were some big things happening.
So, Tulsi, I think that you're unique to be able to discuss this topic and, of course, to respond to what President Trump has talked about as well, because there's all these attacks that, we can't question NATO. We can't question the funding of NATO. We can't question, would these countries actually do what they say they were going to do in Article 5? Would they actually send their sons and daughters, as you said, and their the men and women who serve in their countries' militaries to defend these other countries? Or would they just expect the United States to do it like maybe we've done in the past? We're kind of showing we do in Ukraine right now, even though it's not so much soldiers, but it's all this military equipment. We're not really sure exactly what the end goal is there. But your statement alone, are you surprised that making a statement like that makes such big news that, hey, we need to get control of NATO to make sure that if these countries want to be in this group with us, that we're all paying our fair share?
Jordan, it doesn't surprise me because this is the way that the permanent Washington establishment has responded for so long towards anyone who dares to even ask the question, some pretty important questions about what is the purpose of NATO in this day and age? What are we, the American people, gaining from our membership in NATO? Does it serve our national security interests? And if so, how? And if it does, then how much are we, the American people, willing to expend towards that membership, both in our taxpayer dollars and potentially the lives of my brothers and sisters in uniform? And so for Donald Trump to force this question and force these NATO countries and members to be confronted with the reality of how many of them, frankly, are not, they don't feel it is important enough to meet the bare minimum standard of payment towards NATO, then why should we, frankly? And I know the American people are sick and tired of being the ones who are footing the bill when these other countries don't feel that the threats are important enough for themselves to make those investments, both in their own taxpayer dollars and in the lives of their young men and women. These are serious questions, and I think it's a very clear statement. I just want to say that we should all pay attention to how quickly the Hillary Clintons and Mitt Romneys of the world are trying to shut down any discussion around this issue. Anytime they don't want us to ask questions, we know that they are afraid and that there is something they're trying to hide.
You know what it feels like, Tulsi? It feels like they can't tell us what we're doing in Ukraine. Like, I was pleased to see that finally the U.S. didn't make the move at the UN to ultimately support a resolution that was going to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. But again, they have threatened to do that with Israel. But with Ukraine, it's like, okay, you've had a long time to be able to explain what our goal is, like what is the end game to the American people. And there is no one in Washington, D.C., no one on the right, no one on the left, no one who supports the war, who can give us a clear message for a goal to ultimately end this conflict that will also benefit the United States of America and the American people.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The definition of quote unquote winning changes drastically depending on who you're talking to and depending on the day of the week. I happened to be at a dinner with some folks a few days ago where one of the people at the dinner disagreed with my position on Ukraine. And she very accusingly said, Tulsi, so you just want to end the war, don't you? And I smiled and I said, yes, I do. I have friends in Ukraine. I've been to Ukraine many times. I went to Ukraine for the first time during my R&R of my deployment to Iraq. I went to a spiritual and meditation retreat in Crimea. I have been very concerned for their safety and the safety and the lives of the Ukrainian people, which is why from the very beginning, I have been advocating for negotiations and a peaceful resolution to this war, something that now it's been well over a year. Even our own military leaders are saying the only way this thing ends is through some kind of negotiation to reach a peace treaty. When this woman asked me this question, do you just want to end the war? And I said, yes, I do. Don't you want to prevent more innocent lives from being lost? And she said, well, I just don't want Putin to win. And that right there is the problem. Rather than leaders and decision makers here in our own country thinking about what is the right course of action to take based on what is in the best interest of the American people and our own national security, they are in this place where they say, well, we just don't want Putin to win, but they don't really know how to define what that is. And the goalpost keeps moving, but they are more than happy to continue to fuel this proxy war with Russia, sacrificing more and more Ukrainian lives and spending billions more that is going directly into the pockets of the military industrial complex. And once again, as you said, none of them being able to answer the question very clearly about how this serves the national security interests of the United States. And don't pay attention to those who are saying, well, we've got to stop them over there before they come over and invade us here. Our own intelligence agency said Russia was going to take Kiev, what was it, within 48 hours or certainly within a week. They still haven't taken Kiev. They were not in and are not in a position to take Kiev, what to speak of invade all of Europe and the United States. So let's be real, be very clear-eyed about what we are facing, and ask the tough questions that Donald Trump is forcing on leaders in our country and the American people.
I mean, Tulsi, I still get the question from my daughter. My daughter is a first grader. She still asks me in the car occasionally, just every once in a while checking in, Dad, is there still that war going on in Ukraine and Russia? She knows we do work in these places. I mean, she doesn't know much more about it than that, but it's like, and she's like, why? And you know what? I don't have a great answer.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have.
Do you, Logan? I mean, when you say that, it's like it's your kids. Why are we still funding this?
I think at this point, I think that's the difference. Is there is that conversation, we've had this before, where they get stuck in a cycle where you go, it is okay to say, yes, at the beginning of this, you were supportive of it. We understood what the mission was, the goal. And eventually you get to the point where you are a year, 2 years, 3 years in, and it does start to go, what happened here? Why are we at this point? And Tulsi, I wanted to kind of reframe it before we wrap up, back to sort of the conversation around NATO. You obviously have seen a lot of what's happened with President Trump over the weekend, and you had Hillary Clinton coming out making statements. You've obviously been on dealt with that before, let's just say, and you know what that can mean. But what if NATO members could come into compliance? Do you think at this point, as an organization, is this something we should be considering still supporting?
I think this is a very real conversation the American people need to have. And the fact that people like Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden don't want us to have this conversation should make us even more eager to force the question on the American people and our representatives in our government. This kind of analysis has not happened, largely because the warmongers in Washington won't allow it. Anytime anyone asks, well, what is the relevance of NATO to our national security today? We know why it was formed originally, and you look through the history of NATO and how the world has changed, and yet NATO really hasn't changed and hasn't asked themselves this question about what their mission is. What's wrong with having the conversation? When Hillary Clinton and others like her respond to people who ask relevant, important questions with smears like you're a Putin puppet, or you're a useful idiot, or you are just doing the bidding of Putin, those aren't substantive responses. There has to be a very real dialogue about the pros and cons and the very real costs that come from any of our foreign policy decisions that we are making.
You know, it sickens me because, again, they're willing to play the politics and work real hard to play the political battles. And you're not only playing and of course, fighting in those political discussions, but Tulsi, I mean, you put your life on the line for the country. You still put your life on the line for this country. You still believe it's worth putting your life on the line for the United States of America. And I think that's why they get so nasty with you, because they don't have anything else to say except for name calling. Because, I mean, what it's easy for you and your supporters to say back, well, yeah, you're going to call names like that to somebody who actually puts their life on the line for the United States of America. It's why we love having you on this broadcast, as part of the Secular team, and as part of these really discussions that the American people want to have, and they're sick and tired of being told they're unpatriotic if they have them. Tulsi Gabbard, thanks for joining us on the show today as part of the Secular team.
Thank you so much.